Hello children, and welcome back to Wellywood Wargaming. In this little episode, I'm going to continue on the theme of my Badab War exploration by giving you another Adeptus Astartes Aeronautica Imperialis Xiphon Interceptor, this time, Grimdark painting tutorial. God, that was a mouthful. Anyway, this is a no-nonsense Grimdark painting tutorial for those of you who are lazy and like to speed paint and like Grimdark and like dirty filthy. We're going to go with the Exorcist chapter here. Now the Exorcists are kind of weird. I don't really know a huge amount about the lore, but they look very, very cool. A lot of the time when you see these guys painted, you see them in more of a matte red. Now, as you can see, they are predominantly red and black with a little bit of a bone detail. I kind of ended up leaving out the bone detail in this because for the ship, I think I wanted to, fighter, should I say, it's not a ship. I actually wanted to try something different with these guys. In the picture that I just brought up a second ago, the armor does actually look less matte and more metallic. So we're going to go with a bit of lead belcher over the top of a white primer here. Reason being is, of course, whatever we put over a white primer as opposed to a black or grey is going to end up being brighter. So just a quick smash of lead belcher all over this guy is what we do first for this Exorcist chapter fighter that we've got going on here. Now I am going to do hopefully every single chapter that was involved in the Badab War. If you don't know, the Badab War was a civil war between the Adeptus Astartes chapters, all successor chapters in fact, apart from I believe the Salamanders maybe, when one chapter kind of went rogue and turned to chaos, and a load of other guys or chapters ended up siding with them. But I'm going to give you a little bit of lore with each episode, maybe just a tiny weeny bit. But anyway, enough about that for now. We're going to focus on just the Exorcists. Really cool name, really cool sort of iconography. It seems like in the lore they kind of might be hinting at sort of gene seed coming from Grey Knight stock, but I could be completely wrong on that one. But as you can see, we're going with a metallic red here instead of a matte red. And the way that I've done it is I've started with lead belcher, which is obviously a gunmetal. It's not very bright, it's very dull. But now we're going to hit the entirety of the miniature. I've said entirety again, I say that a lot in my videos, I've noticed, with a much brighter, I think, rune fang steel here, and just bring things up with the makeup brush here, nice soft makeup brush with a round tip. Hit that with the much brighter silver and bring out all the details and make things shine, shine, shine like a diamond before we hit it with the red color that we're going to go with. Now, I've done this quite a few times with red. I've made lots of metallic reds before, and I tend to do this like this actually. But normally I don't start with lead belcher. Normally I would start with a mid silver and then highlight up to a really, really bright silver. This time I'm actually starting with a darker silver and then going up to the bright highlight. So this will be slightly more dull than what I'm used to, but that's kind of what I'm going for because I want this ship, or sorry, should I say fighter, to look very, very much grimy and dirty and filthy and dark, because we are here for the Grimdark, we are not here for the heavy metal. And that's what it's all about. So as you can see, still hitting this quite heavily with the dry brush of the lighter silver there as well. The next thing we're going to do is hit it, of course, with a nice clean all over job of Flesh Tearers Red. Now, of course, Flesh Tearers Red is exactly the kind of red that I would say matches the Exorcists in their sort of colour. However, Flesh Tearers definitely do have sort of more matte armour. These guys, however, we're going to go with the metallic armour. And contrast paint over metallics gives you quite a nice effect, if you ask me. Now, some contrast paints are better than others over metallics. You really have to do a bit of experimentation. I've used some of the oranges, some of the blues and greens. I particularly like the greens actually and the reds. I've done some Sisters of Battle like this actually, and they actually look really, really cool. I'm really happy with them. But for this guy, like I said, we're starting off with lead belcher, so it does mean that things are going to be slightly more dull in this instance. Now, the thing you want to watch out for with Citadel contrast paints is sort of pooling. So do be careful, especially with metallics, because it can look a bit naff if you just sort of hit it with the contrast all over and let it pool. So you do try and spread it out a little bit. As you can see, here is the sort of almost dry effect. We kind of missed out some of the silver details here, like the engines and the quad las cannons at the front there as well, which I'm now going to hit with a little bit of Nuln Oil all over. I said in my previous video actually that I do think that the recipe for Nuln Oil has changed slightly. It's not as dark as it was, and it also doesn't seem to stain the metal. That can be a good thing and a bad thing, but be aware of it, because I certainly have been made aware of it lately. I'm usually having to use more than one coat as well. So that's what I'm going to do with that. Just a little bit of Nuln Oil on those remaining metallic areas. Now they're kind of already highlighted up underneath the Nuln Oil with that dry brush from earlier as well, so that's pretty cool. Don't really need to do anything more with those guys. And the next thing we're going to move on to here is a little bit of detail, a tiny bit of detail, not really detail, I would say, just an accent color, because with most of my sort of grimdark style of painting, I suppose, at least for me, I like to keep the palette very minimal, maybe just one primary color, and then one or two accents as well. So with this one we're going with black, because the Exorcists on their power armor do have black trim, black bolt guns, things like that. So we definitely need black in the mix somewhere. So I'm going to go with I'm going to plan out where I'm going to put the black. I quite like it on the sort of hinges where the wings sort of look like they fold up, and I'm also going to do a little bit of black around the sort of structure around behind the cockpit, just to give a little bit of variation to how it looks really. And this is just a flat chaos black, nothing too fancy, no highlights, and again, this entire miniature in fact is going to look a little bit dull and a little bit boring until we get to the sort of final step, to be honest, and that's usually the way with a lot of these paint jobs. As you can see, there is a little bit of blotchiness on the contrast paint. I can see it on the wing there now, much more so watching back the video. But it is what it is. We're going to try and get rid of that afterwards. But as you can see now, I'm actually using a bit of contrast black Templar, I believe, on the engines at the back there, just to add a bit of soot and grime, make them look like they actually have been heated up. Just on the sort of last part of the engines there. And you can water this down a little bit if you want, but I didn't here. I just kind of went straight in, because that's the kind of guy I am. I just go straight from the pot with everything. Don't use a palette anymore because it can't be asked. So neither should you. We're not pros here. We are speed painters, and that's what it's all about. Anyway, make sure you get inside the nozzles. I'm actually using my finger a little bit there. You can see that I use my fingers to smudge things and blend things a little bit. And as a result, my hands are constantly covered in paint. People always ask me what I do in my spare time. I come up with all sorts of funny answers, but generally speaking, my hands are always covered in paint. It can be all sorts of bright and vivid colours, but usually browns, which looks a bit suspect if I'm honest. Anyway, moving on. The next thing we're going to be doing here is a little bit of sort of weathering now, I suppose. So what we've got here is a sponge that I've ripped up to create some less sort of abrupt sort of angles on it, so it's a little bit more bitty, and we're going to use a brown, any brown really, a dark brown preferably. In this case I've gone with dryad bark, I believe, and we're just going to quite liberally smash that all over the miniature, certainly on the top, or the raised edges I should say, making sure that we do it in a fairly random way. But I'm going to go quite heavy here because I do want to sort of make things slightly more dull and smudgy. So you can see I'm kind of moving things around my finger a bit at times as well, like a true artist. But yeah, we're not going to stop here actually. We're going to go with the second colour in a second. But starting with the brown, I think it's best to use the darker colour first. We're then going to go in afterwards and use the lead belcher as well, which you can see here actually. Sorry, I'm using lead belcher at this point. But this will give a little, you know, some quite realistic sort of chipping, seeing as that lead belcher was the actual colour underneath the red when we did apply the red. But yeah, a brown and a silver, or a gunmetal should I say, in terms of the chipping, and that's pretty much that. Once we finish this point, we're then going to move on to the next step, which is where things get far more interesting. a tiny little hint of detail and colour here as we start adding a white scar, I believe it is. Let's have a look. White scar, we got white scar here. We have, I think we've got a little bit of white scar on the tip of the smaller detail brush there, just to fill out or block out the areas of the windscreen there as well. So just a sort of stippling motion here, just to spread it around a little bit. I kind of said in my last video, doing these Aeronautica Imperialis cockpits, I do find that I like to add a little bit of detail, a little bit of sort of texture to them, just to sort of create the illusion of someone being behind it, or something being behind it, or behind the glass, should I say. But, you know, I think I've seen other ways of doing it that are probably more effective, but I just do a nice, simple, cool blue here by adding a ethermatic blue contrast paint over it afterwards. Just making sure that I'm sort of dragging from top to bottom, so it's slightly lighter at the top of the window than it is at the bottom. And just filling in all of those areas of white with the ethermatic blue. It's a cool name, that, ethermatic. I'm not quite sure what it means, but sounds cool. It sounds like something from Ghostbusters, actually, don't you think? Anyway, that's that, and that's pretty much the last of it for the whole miniature, really. It looks a bit crap at this point, I'll be honest, but again, we don't really care too much. This is a speed painting job. No one's going to analyze it on the table, as long as it looks okay-ish, I suppose. But the next step, and the most important step, of course, is the oil wash step, and this is pretty important. We're going to go with a black and burnt umber mix, just as I did in the last video with the Minotaur, just to bring things together, and it will sort of blend those details together, add a bit of grime, a bit of dirt, a bit of filth, but it will also just give it that whole sort of grimdark vibe that we're really looking for here. Now you can apply this completely all over the model. You kind of want to get every single bit, even the cockpit, I suppose, just to sort of dull everything down, bring it all together, like I said, and add that layer of extra grime and filth that actually makes it look realistic for once. Because I do find that a lot of paint jobs that don't use oils and don't use streak and grime and things like that just don't look that realistic, to be honest. Most machinery anyway, ends up being oily and rusty and dirty and disgusting, particularly if it's flying through space and the upper atmospheres of battlefields and stuff. So all of these ships, all of these planes and whatnot are going to be perpetually looking pretty fucked, to be honest. So that's that. Now once we've applied that to the entire miniature, we're going to let that dry a little bit, and then we're going to come back in with a cotton bud and just sort of get rid of the excess moisture on some of the top surfaces, leaving it in the recesses there as well. And then once we've done that, we'll probably leave it overnight, maybe 24 hours, just to sort of cure and dry. It can take a bit longer than that, depending on, you know, how much it's sort of pooled in areas, but do try and avoid it sort of pooling too much, and sort of suck up that moisture and wick it away with a cotton bud if you can. But then after that, once it's dry, we'll come back tomorrow morning, we'll have a look and we'll create some photos. But as you can see, things are already starting to look much better, even with a wet layer of the oil wash on it. It really does bring things together, but we'll be able to see much better when I take some photos of it and put those at the end of the video so that you can have a look. But let me know what you think anyway. If you do like this, are you going to use this for your Exorcists, or have you got a far nicer looking concoction? I don't know. I'm fairly happy with this one though. Probably not as tried and tested as my Minotaur's scheme, but it will certainly do for now, and that is the second one of my Badab allies, or Badab alliance, as we move on to the next one. Who's it going to be? Which chapter is going to be next? Please do like, share, subscribe, and check out the Patreon as well if you'd like to support the channel further, and I will catch you on the flip side. Peace out.